Trump fears dying while 30 leaders enter a secret meeting about NATO's future. The two news stories broke at the same time because they reveal a brutal crisis against President Trump.
We are going to raise more than $1 trillion a year for defense. You could see the respect and affection in that room, real love for our country. I don't want to say that about myself so I don't sound conceited, but they feel that. Do they like the work I do? They said so. Sir, we love you. There was total unity in that room.
He spoke openly about the possibility of being killed by Iran. He said he appears on target lists. He admitted that he has been lucky so far and stated that this luck may not last. Hours later, new information showed that Israel had sent the United States a warning about a possible Iranian plan to assassinate him, and that the presidential security decided to swap the newer plane used by Trump for an older aircraft. At the same time, the Wall Street Journal revealed that nearly 30 European leaders had locked themselves in for about 5 hours at the headquarters of the European Council in Brussels, without cell phones, cameras, or advisors to discuss how to reduce dependence on the United States. The meeting took place in the third week of January, after Trump's threats about Greenland, but it came to light just as the NATO summit exposed new disputes with Spain, Denmark, and other allies. What threat led Trump to talk about his own death? Why did nearly 30 leaders decide to talk without phones? How does this rupture change NATO's future? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. Trump brought the Iranian threat to the center of the Ankara summit. In front of the cameras, he stated that Tehran wanted to eliminate the US leader and admitted that he might not escape it forever. His statement carried weight because it didn't remain just words. American authorities received a warning from Israel about a possible assassination plot. Some of these authorities considered the information incomplete and not entirely reliable, but the risk was taken seriously enough to change the logistics of the presidential trip. On his way back from Turkey, Trump made a stop in the United Kingdom and continued on an older Air Force One, equipped with defensive systems already known to the security teams. The concern about his own death came along with a retaliation order. On July 10th, Trump stated that he had ordered a large-scale military response if the Iranian government attempted to assassinate him. The message was crafted to make it clear that any attack on the president would have direct consequences for Iranian facilities. Iran has promised revenge since the death of General Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in an operation authorized by Trump in 2020. Publicly available information has not yet shown that the new plan was ready for execution. But the change of plane, the increased security, and the orders given by Trump show that Washington did not treat the warning as mere propaganda. While Trump was talking about survival, Europe was discussing political survival. The meeting revealed by the Wall Street Journal took place almost at midnight in Brussels, at the headquarters of the European Council. Presidents and prime ministers were instructed to enter alone. There were no recordings, cameras, or cell phones. The debate was already in its fifth hour when the leaders began to openly discuss a possible strategic separation from the United States. The meeting was not an official NATO summit, but it brought together heads of government who formed the European core of the alliance, and it discussed how to act if Washington were to withdraw. Feeling comfortable with some participants, they called that night a therapy session. Such was the accumulated tension. Emmanuel Macron opened the toughest part of the conversation. According to participants interviewed by the reporters, the French president said that Europe needed to set limits and that there was no turning back. The assessment was that military, economic, and technological dependence on the United States had become a security risk. The Prime Minister of Belgium was even more aggressive and warned that Europe could become a miserable slave to Washington. Giorgia Meloni disagreed. The Prime Minister of Italy argued that Trump could still be convinced and that breaking with the United States would be a mistake. Meloni's reaction showed that the bloc was not united against the American president. But the mere fact that the conversation took place revealed the extent of the mistrust.
Actually, I think she's a nice person. We had a good chat. Our relationship turned a bit sour because she refused to help us. Again, I didn't pressure her much, but she refused to get involved with the Strait of Hormuz, or you could also say just with Iran. She refused to get involved. That soured the relationship, but I like her. I think she's a nice person, but she made a mistake. We do this because we think it's something important to do. But she just wasn't there for us, and I wasn't happy about that. You can imagine I wasn't happy about that.
Greenland was the most dangerous trigger. Trump once again advocated for American control over the autonomous territory linked to Denmark and justified the pressure with the growing presence of Russia and China in the Arctic. For Copenhagen, the threat directly affected Danish sovereignty. For European governments, the risk was even greater. A NATO member began to discuss control over an area belonging to another ally. French troops arrived in Greenland alongside Danish forces during the January crisis. Afterwards, Mark Rutte sought to turn the confrontation into a joint Arctic security plan called the Arctic Center, with the participation of the United States, Canada, and European allies from the region. Talks about investments and military presence continue between Washington, Greenland, and Denmark. The Ankara summit showed how this tension plays out in front of the cameras. Trump opened by attacking allies. He criticized the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Italy for not supporting the operations against Iran the way he wanted. He called Spain a terrible partner. He ordered the suspension of trade with Madrid and again threatened to withdraw American troops from Europe. A few hours later, he entered the closed meeting with the 32 leaders and changed his tone. He didn't repeat the threats against Spain nor insist on Greenland. When he left, he spoke of love, respect, and unity.
Everyone has been great, honestly. Do you know why? Because they respect our country again. They used to laugh at us. They thought we were a bunch of fools. They saw a president who couldn't even speak or walk. It was a disaster. They lost respect for us. But now they have more respect for our country than ever before.
Diplomats told Reuters that the Allies' strategy was to praise Trump, credit him for the increase in military spending, and avoid any outburst that could put the summit at risk. Mark Rutte took on the role of main crisis manager. The Secretary General told Trump that he had transformed NATO by pressuring the Europeans to spend more on defense. He also publicly stated that he saw enormous unity among the 32 leaders. When a Danish reporter asked if staying silent in the face of threats against Greenland and Spain affected his self-respect, Rutte once again praised Trump and defended the joint work in the Arctic.
Rasmus Tvemo from the Danish news agency Ritzel. Mark, you were with Trump at times when he talked about buying Greenland, attacking allies, and starting trade wars, things that the old Mark Rutte would not have approved of. Does it affect your self-respect to sit next to him without saying anything?
You know, what I always do is acknowledge when praise is deserved. And I think we should praise Donald Trump for the fact that NATO is much stronger. Of course, this has to do with the Russian threat, it has to do with the war in Ukraine, but it also has a lot to do with President Trump. Delivering now what, since Eisenhower, the United States has tried to achieve, equalizing spending between the US and Europe. And this makes Europe stronger, makes Europe more relevant to the United States as a partner. So that's the transformative character of this summit.
The choice became clear. Avoid direct confrontation with Washington, preserve the US military presence, and deliver results that Trump can present as a victory. The numbers helped Rutte calm the president. NATO reported that the allies have already come close to investing 4% of their economies in defense, toward the goal of 5% by 2035. The summit announced more than $50 billion in new military purchases in a single day. For Trump, this progress confirms that his pressure worked. For Europe, the increase in spending also works as insurance against a possible future American withdrawal. Each new contract strengthens the alliance today and gradually reduces the dependence that led the leaders to the private conversation in Brussels. Spain became the clearest example of this method. Pedro Sanchez tried to reduce the conflict and said he had a cordial conversation with Trump. The President of the United States softened his speech during the closed meeting, but did not ease the pressure on military spending. The episode put the Allies on alert because it showed that a discussion about the budget can turn into a trade threat in just a few minutes. It also showed that the praise given to Trump does not mean trust. They work as a tool to prevent tougher decisions against the alliance itself. The next step is already set. NATO will hold its next summit in Albania, while the Arctic Century Plan moves forward and talks about Greenland continue. Europe is boosting military production and seeking to reduce reliance on Washington without risking a sudden US withdrawal. The test now will be to prevent the dispute over Greenland and the Iranian threat from triggering a new crisis before that meeting. If Trump goes back to using troops and trade as direct pressure, the private conversation in Brussels could serve as a practical roadmap for faster European autonomy. Thank you very much for watching this video until the end. Support our project and contribute financially through the Pix key that appears on your screen. We are an independent channel committed to bringing you the truth. Your contribution helps us keep going.